Hello, my name is Trey Hampton, and this is my vulnerability assessment. A little summary. This assessment is focused on finding two hidden servers located in our lab environment, a Linux server and a Windows server. We are also determining the security posture of these two servers by running them through the Greenbone scanner. The goal was to find any potential vulnerabilities and recommend a solution to these vulnerabilities. Using the Greenbone scanner and Nmap tools, I was able to locate and then run a vulnerability scan on a hidden Linux server. This assessment revealed many critical vulnerabilities that if these were exploited, attackers could compromise data and cause many disruptions if not addressed appropriately. In this report, I have stated a recommendation for each of the high vulnerabilities located on the server. There is a critical need to address these vulnerabilities, and by implementing these recommendations, we can mitigate many of these vulnerabilities. It highlights the importance of security patches as well as ensuring that proper configurations are set up. Also, continued monitoring will need to be done to manage any future vulnerabilities that may arise. Technical summary. In my assessment of both of these servers, I focused on using Nmap and Greenbone Scanner for both Windows and Linux. Using Nmap with the option -SP, which allowed me to do a ping scan. This allowed me to identify which active hosts were on the network. Using this option, I did a scan on 192.168.1.0/24 to identify any host that responded to ICMP echo requests. Using the -SP option allows for a broad sweep to help identify live systems. Next, I identified the IP address 192.168.1.30 as being an option for the hidden network. I ran the command nmap-o 192.168.1.30 to determine which ports were open. The results were that all ports were opening, indicating this was a server. To try and locate the hidden Windows server, I tried using Nmap on the current Windows server to try and see if any servers were actively listening. I tried a whole mess of different commands to locate the hidden server like ARP, Nmap, and NSLOOKUP. Despite trying all of these, I was not able to locate the hidden server. I believe that it may have something to do with the lab environment not having a connection. If Nmap was preloaded, I could have been able to look it up. A few of the Linux high-risk findings was the Apache Tomcat AJP. The Apache Tomcat is AJP is a vulnerability to allow remote code execution through what is named GhostCat. This basically allows attackers to read or add files inside of web app directories by exploiting a flaw inside the AJP connector. This makes the application more susceptible to exposure. The root cause of this exploit is that when it can allow unauthorized users to interact with the connector, attackers would be able to upload, modify, or read files in the Tomcat web directory. The best recommendation and fix for this would be to update Apache Tomcat to a patched version. If necessary, you can also comment out the AJP connector to help prevent this from being exploited. Although if your AJP is in use, you would need to ensure that your AJP connector has the required secret attribute, which is like a password and should be treated as such to help ensure security. Another finding is the NVT post SQL default credentials were set to Postgres. This means that using Postgres SQL without changing the default password would leave it extremely vulnerable. This would give attackers the ability to bypass authentication and directly log in, accessing the database. Attackers would then be able to execute malicious commands, modify, delete, or extract sensitive data. The best way to fix this would be to change passwords as soon as possible. You can do this by accessing the Postgres SQL command line and input sudo-u Postgres PSQL. Once you have gotten access to the shell, you can use alt user and Postgres password and input a new password. This will allow you to update the password and prevent unauthorized access. Another finding was NVT SSL-TLS, OpenSSL CCS, man-in-the-middle security bypass is a vulnerability is a high-risk vulnerability is a critical failure in some versions of OpenSSL. This vulnerability allows attackers to exploit the handshake and establish themselves as a middleman during this process. The attacker would then be able to force weak keys, which would allow them to decrypt the keys much easier. This is a severe risk because an attacker will be able to access sensitive, personal identifiable information. To help mitigate this vulnerability, you'll need to upgrade to the latest version of OpenSSL that you're using. Also, when upgrading this version, ensure that all machines running OpenSSL are updated as well. VSFTPD is a high vulnerability because the VSFTPD-2.3-5 tar-gz has a backdoor in the source file. The backdoor is introduced maliciously, which would allow an attacker to exploit the FTP service by starting a connection, and the attacker would enter a sequence of characters and a username. Once this is triggered, the backdoor would open a shell on port 6200-TCP, giving unauthorized access to a server. To fix this vulnerability, there is a secure package that is available directly from the vendor for fixing this issue. It should be downloaded immediately and installed. It will be crucial to verify the installation of the updated package to ensure that the backdoor has been removed, and you can do this by comparing cryptographic hashes, which will be given to you by the vendor to ensure that it hasn't been tampered with during the download. TWiki, cross-site scripting, and command execution are high-risk vulnerabilities because it is a security error that came to because of improper input sanitation and the handling of the URL parameter macro. Basically, the macro failed to validate the user input, which would allow attackers to inject and execute malicious code. The best solution to dealing with this vulnerability is to update to the latest version of TWiki that is on the vendor's website. This update patched the URL param macro that was being exploited. Ensure that you go to the official vendor's page when downloading this updated version. PHP is prone to many vulnerabilities, and attackers will use this for unauthorized access to execute commands. An example would be that attackers exploit misconfigured PHP scripts like exec, system, or shell exec, which would let them retrieve information located on a server. Ensuring proper configuration is crucial. A good solution to fix this is to update PHP to the latest stable version. Also, you modify the php.ini configuration file to disable any dangerous functions like exec, system, or shell exec using the disables function directive. This will help prevent attackers from executing this command and gathering data from your server. HTTP web servers are misconfigured and allow for the put and delete methods. This could allow an attacker to put executable code onto the web server or delete information. This could be very damaging if an attacker found this vulnerability. The best recommendation is to disable these methods so they can no longer be used. You can do this by adding a security constraint and then disabling the option you want. For example, HTTP-method delete HTTP-method. distcc is a compiler system that is designed to distribute compilation tasks across servers. This system is also prone to remote code execution if it is improperly configured. When improperly configured, it can allow attackers to exploit a lack of authorization to submit malicious jobs on the server. It would allow attackers to execute code at the system level. First recommendation is to update the application to the latest level. Also, configuring distcc to operate in a more secure environment is the best option. You can do this by restricting access to only trusted IP addresses using a firewall or TCP wrappers. Using the host.allow file will let you only permit authorized connections. Distributed Ruby can permit an unauthorized system to execute commands, and it can do this because it will allow for objects to be passed through processes. This can expose your system to code execution and privilege escalation and could compromise the security of your system. To help mitigate this risk, you can set a safe level for the Ruby environment, and this enforces taint checking, which is basically just restricting the untrusted objects that can be done. You can do safe equals 1, and this will make sure that any untrusted data cannot be used in operations. FTP brute force attack logins vulnerability allows for the remote FTP servers with known or weak credentials to brute force attack, giving access. Automated tools will attempt to crack usernames and passwords until they gain access. This kind of attack can be extremely damaging to a server, giving unauthorized access to attackers, and this is a high risk for FTP servers that are exposed to the internet. It is essential to ensure that strong password policies are in place for all accounts. Having unique, complex, and regularly updated passwords will help mitigate this. Also, having something in place like a multi-factor authentication will also help mitigate this and add an additional layer of security. Ingress lock has a potential backdoor exploit that would give attackers access to exploit executable commands and could compromise the system. This vulnerability will tend to target systems where port 1524-TCP is open. This could potentially allow the attacker to modify files and take sensitive data, or even deploy malware. This can happen when systems are exposed to untrusted networks. To mitigate this issue, you should isolate the system from the network, do a full reset of the system and reinstallation. This helps ensure that the backdoor to the system is gone. You can then close port 1524-TCP by disabling any services associated with it. You can do this by running sudo systemctl stop and then the name of service, and then sudo systemctl disable and then the name of service. Running those commands should disable any services on that port. You should then run an audit on the affected system to ensure that the backdoor has been completely removed. The vulnerability ranking scale. Greenbone uses a ranking system that is based on the Common Vulnerability Scoring System. It uses this system to classify the severity of how dangerous a specific vulnerability is. The scores for CVSS range from 0 to 10.0. The higher the number associated with the vulnerability, the more critical that vulnerability is. This scale can be beneficial because it can help prioritize the vulnerabilities that are associated with whatever system you're using. The ranking categories are as follows: critical 9 to 10, high 7 to 8.9, medium 4 to 6.9, low 0.9 to 3.9, and informational is at 0. This ranking system is also based on how easily the ranked vulnerabilities can be exploited. The focus of these rankings again is to prioritize which vulnerabilities should be fixed first. Having this list is extremely beneficial when you have a list of many vulnerabilities. And these are the references that I used creating this vulnerability assessment. Thank you.